Mass Effect 3, my favorite part of the trilogy. You probably think I gone insane, how can this part be someone's favorite, with that ending? But I'll tell you, despite the controversial final, I love the third game because, unlike the second part, wasn't a massive disappointment. I describe Mass Effect 3 as a beautiful airplane gracefully flying toward its destination, but at the very end, shit hits the turbine, the plane crashes and explodes. The thing is, in Mass Effect 2 I was a bit disappointed with the main story. Yeah, the companion stories are really good and important to world building, but the whole time I was waiting for the main plot to begin, and when it finally did, it ended almost immediately. What was so nicely set up in the first game was pushed to the third, and the collectors, while cool in design, ended up just being villains of the week, like minions of the real boss. But in Mass Effect 3 I instantly got what I wanted, a large-scale war against the Reapers from the very first minutes. What an incredible intro, epic, bombastic, full of scale, everything works perfectly. The stakes are immediately at the maximum, Earth is in a catastrophe, and it was especially painful to watch a child die at the hand of the Reapers while we flew off to gather allies to save the galaxy. Yes, it's a bit of a cheap trick, but damn it, it works. Fun random fact, the terrifying Reaper sound was actually made from an Alberta dumpster. The sound of the lid closing equal nightmare fuel. Throughout the game there are insanely epic Reaper moments, like when the massive worm eats a Reaper. It's pure nature versus technology, or the part where Shepard fires a giant super cannon at huge mech Reaper. This is exactly what I wanted after Mass Effect 1, not some villain of the week. But Mass Effect 3 isn't just boom boom bang, it also gives a fantastic closure to story arcs stretching back from the very first game. Take the Krogan, back in Mass Effect 1, they stood out as these fierce tragic warriors, charismatic, brutal, with their own code. And of course, everyone remembers Rex, with his sarcasm and dry humor. I love him, and it's easy to sympathize with the plight of his race. In Mass Effect 3, you finally get the chance to cure the genophage. You can also side with the Salarians and sabotage the cure, the logic being that Krogan reproduction would eventually lead to another galactic war. A solid argument, but Rex is my bro, so of course I cured them. If Rex is dead, you get a replacement Krogan who's far less likable, and suddenly silent argument feels much more convincing. And then there's more than sacrifice, for many a heartbreaking moment. In my case, Morden died back in Mass Effect 2, so I had a stand-in I didn't care much about. So when he went off to sacrifice himself, my reaction was, I guess I feel bad for you, but not really. Still, I was genuinely happy to give Krogan a future. Then comes the Geth vs Quarian arc, easily my favorite. The emotionally packed floored me. I literally cry when Legion sacrificed himself to give the Geth true intelligence. Legion was such a bro. Yeah, the AI seeking freedom story is cliché, but it works because Legion is written so well. And we finally learn the true cause of the Geth-Quarian war. The Quarians struck first out the fear, trying to wipe out the creations before they grew to independent. So who's really right? The Geth were defending themselves, but the Quarians act out of fear of losing control over their own creations. Both sides make sense. Personally, I want a happy ending, and I wasn't about to sacrifice Tali. So when she finally saw her people reclaim their home world, I was so happy. Honestly, I think this whole storyline is the most emotional moment in the entire series. Now I've been praising the third game a lot, but it's time to balance things out with some criticism. Let's start with DLC that introduced a companion from the ancient Prothean race, and here's the problem. The Protheans were one of the most mysterious and important races in the entire trilogy. In the first two games, they presented as a myth, long-lost civilization, and then suddenly you meet a living prothean who reveals tons of details about the culture, their war with the Reapers, and their connection to the relics. When I first played the game, I honestly thought the character was part of the main story. When I later found out he was actually locked behind DLC, I was shocked. How can such a huge, crucial chunk of lore be sold separately as they one DLC? Alright, now let's talk about positives. The character really is unique, he shares so much cool information, shattering our image of the Protheans as noble warriors. In reality, they were a vast empire that oppressed other races. His personality is harsh, blunt, and cynical. He never softens his words. He says things exactly as they are, often looking at others from a position of superiority. To him, the current galactic races are primitive, so over time he does start to recognize the potential that makes for an especially interesting dynamic with Lara. Who spent her whole life studying and idolizing his race. On top of that, he has a unique class and abilities, playing somewhat like a vanguard with his own biotic powers, so I can only imagine how angry fans must have been back on release day. Thankfully, in the remaster he's included by default and you don't have to buy him separately anymore. Now I want to talk about the gameplay, and in my humble opinion it's better than in the first two games. The shooting and moving animations are much smoother now, the foundation is the same as before, it's still a cover-based shooter, here victory depends much more on your skills than on your stats. Sure, leveling up makes you stronger, but it's not the main factor for success. You can also combine different abilities, for example lift enemies into the air and then throw them or freeze them and then detonate them. It's always fun for me. Speaking of abilities, I really messed up at first. I didn't realize that the more weapons you carry, the heavier the load, which slows down your power recharge speed. I keep wondering why my cooldowns were so long. As for progression, this game has my favorite leveling system in the series. In the first game, but the end it got repetitive and had nothing new to offer, while in the second game it was oversimplified. In the third they made it more complex compared to Mass Effect 2. Now after rank 3 you get branching upgrades. For example, you can choose to increase damage against a single target or expand the radius of the attack. It doesn't have RPG style packs that drastically change gameplay, but at least there is choice here. They also brought back weapon mods for the first game. You can add a scope, increase damage or something else. There's more customization for weapons, so armor still works the same as in Mass Effect 2. New enemy types were added as well, my favorite being the benches. I admit, the first time one of them started constantly teleporting toward me, I got pretty scared. That said, Mass Effect still doesn't really have great boss fights. The only one I can recall is the Ripple battle, which was epic but very simple in design. Basically just avoid its laser and shoot it. Another improvement is that the maps are shorter and more focused, less wandering down endless corridors until you stumble into enemies. And then there's a new mechanic in Mass Effect 3, dialogue mini conflicts. Sometimes Shepard can walk up to the two NPCs, often on the Normandy or the Citadel, who are arguing, and you get the chance to support one side or intervene. The cool thing is, it makes the war feel alive, not just something happening in cutscenes, but also in regular gameplay. Of course it's a shame that only effect is whether you gain Paragon or Renegade points. It doesn't impact the global story or the world, but it does add to the atmosphere and makes NPCs feel more alive. The side quests really impressed me here. In the previous games they were so simple, just go, shoot and that's it. Of course there are still quests like that in Mass Effect 3, but now there are also interesting ones. For example, you can meet former squad mates from the second game, find out what happened to them, and see how we influence their lives. like Jacob who left Cerberus and took scientists and their families with him. There's also a mission where we have to help the Turians fix their mistakes. In general, the side quests actually have some importance to the universe, which makes them feel meaningful. Now let's talk about the most important topic in Mass Effect, the choices and consequences. To me, the main feature of the series has always been that choices from one game carry over into the next, so every player's world could be slightly different, whether a character is alive, whether Rai survived, and so on. From the first game, you face with tough situations, for example deciding whether to kill Rex or not, or choosing between sacrificing Kaiden or Ashley. Unfortunately, though, these choices don't actually change that much. Yes, Rex can die like any other character and in school that no one is truly safe, but honestly it feels later that he only has two possible fates, as a die or become a leader. Come on BioWare, why so lazy? You could make it less binary. Maybe I'm just spoiled, but after RPGs from Obsidian where you usually have at least 3 paths, having only 2 options feels underwhelming. And that's not even the worst part. Everyone probably remembers the choice in the first game where you can sacrifice the council. Well, I made a choice and I imagined my surprise in the beginning of Mass Effect 3 when they were simply replaced with lookalikes. Imagine feeling right? Choices matter. I also really love what they did with the Elusive Man. He's one of the main antagonists in Mass Effect 3, and his whole deal is that he wants to control the Reapers for humanity. The game gives you multiple dialogue scenes where you can try to argue with him, convince him it's a bad idea. This happened like 2 or 3 times, and of course every single one of the choices is fake. Nothing will change, he'll keep walking toward his scripted goal anyway. Or how I love when they give us choices that don't matter. Yes, at the very end you can convince him that he's being manipulated, and then he dies. So basically he either dies or dies. Wonderful BioWare. I get that giving players full freedom isn't realistic and there will always be some illusion of choice, but not this blatant. Here it's like the devs I set up showing you the middle finger for even daring to want meaningful choices. I ranted a bit, but I can also praise where choices feel impactful. For example, the Geth and quarian quest, where you can actually say both races instead of just one, and whether you can do that depends on decisions you made in the previous game. That kind of stuff I really like. Now let's talk about the ending, and I have such mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, it's truly epic, the scale is grand, and the sense it turned out beautifully. On the other hand, I was genuinely moved by Shepard's death. After all, you spend so much time with this character, making decisions that change the fate of the entire worlds, and then suddenly you realize that the final won't be happy for him. This especially hits hard in the control of Synthesis options, where Shepard literally sacrificed himself so that others have a chance. What touched me is that death isn't shown as defeat, quite the opposite. It's a culmination of the entire journey, it's sacrifice for the team, for friends, for the entire galaxy, and yes, it all sounds rather syrupy and classically heroic, but you know what? It works, and that's really the only thing I like about the ending. Everything else is controversial, starting with the fact that we can hardly influence the Elusive Man, and ending with the whole catalyst thing, this encyclopedia that came out nowhere. It really feels like BioWare didn't know how to end the trilogy, how to explain everything, how to resolve all the mysteries, so they just created a character who would stand there statically and dumb long monologues about everything. And even the things he says are questionable, like when the catalyst claimed that synthetics will always rise up against organics, so they must be destroyed. Fantastic. I never really saw throughout the game that all synthetics were inherently hostile to organics, Andy and Legion are prime examples against that. And the whole twist with the Reapers feels purely executed too. They were set up as these things being the wipe out civilizations every 50,000 years, but then their motivation turned out to be helping organics develop through control and destruction. This feels abstract and purely explained. The behavior doesn't fit into the logic of the universe. Why completely annihilate civilizations every 50,000 years instead of guiding them more gently? Honestly, I think it would be been better if they never explained the motivation at all. Since I played the remastered version, I don't view the ending as negatively as people did in the release, because back then all of the different endings look visually the same and there was a huge sense of incompleteness. It didn't show how our choices actually affected the races and the galaxy. The DLCs are all decent overall, but only one really stands out. Let me start with the others. Omega feels like dynamic but slightly drawn out action flick. Ares Return is enjoyable, the locations are dark and stylish, but the core is basically a long corridor shooter with minimal moral choices. Flashy but without the depth of the series usually has. I like that Ares was given a bit more nuance. You can see she's not just the queen of the underworld, but also a leader capable of inspiring others and even showing care. Overall, it's fine, but not amazing. Arya pretty much carries this DLC on her shoulders. They were fun, I actually enjoyed quite a lot. The detective style was great, it's genuinely fun to walk around, search for clues, talk to people, and piece the mystery together. The atmosphere really pulls you in, making you want to reach the end and uncover the secret. Gameplay wise, it's still standard Mass Effect 3, so there's not much new to say. The bonus that by the end you unlock a new power, the ability to manipulate enemies so they fight for you. I really love abilities like that. As for the leviathans themselves, I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, it's awesome that they showed who's behind the Reapers, it definitely adds more depth. On the other hand, the reveal feels both too straightforward and at the same time a little vague. So while it's cool that we got an answer, I'm not sure it was the answer people were waiting for. Still, for the mystery and the atmosphere alone, it gets a thumbs up from me. Citadel DLC is truly something special, it's just pure joy. The story itself is really simple, but the presentation is phenomenal. It starts off with the shepherd heading to a restaurant to meet Joker and there is this long line in the entrance, but our hero gets waved right through because, well, he's the hero. A funny little moment. Then we find out Joker never actually invited us, he thought we had invited him. Turns out it was all set up, and that's when the action kicks in with only a pistol at your disposal. Suddenly you have to sneak around as much as possible and fight to survive, all while in casual clothes instead of armor. That alone makes the DLC stand out gameplay wise. For part of it, you strip down to just a sidearm and forced to fight your way through. But the real highlight here is the companions. The chemistry between them is just amazing. Honestly, this is exactly what I want to see more of the main game. In Mass Effect 3, the squad banter is often limited, but here you really feel the depth of their relationships. My favorite moments: when the team simultaneously take down an enemy on the staircase, or the hilarious party scenes, like Urban Rex blocking the door as a bouncer, and you can even decide whether to let people or not. The crew constantly jokes with each other too, James and Liara messing around, talent disappearing somewhere. It all gives such a real family feeling that's largely absent from the main story. Yes, the plot itself is simple and the whole Shepherd clone twist isn't that deep, but it's so funny and full of heart. For me, the Delilah will always stay as something warm, something that genuinely makes me smile. And hits even harder when you realize that the fun of the main game might be the crew's last trip together. As for Mass Effect 3 overall, I genuinely like it a lot. The krogan storyline and the Geth quarian arc are especially impressive. Incredibly well crafted, you can really feel the scale of events and the weight of the moral dilemmas. Combat-wise, I think it is the best in the entire series. The shooting feels fantastic, from recoil to aiming, every shot has impact. Sector progression is also more flexible now, it doesn't feel as limited as it did in Mass Effect 2. The only thing that slightly dampens the experience is the ending. It's controversial and leaves mixed emotions after such an epic journey.